thought today that we would talk about Carillion, a huge British company which you might not even have heard of until the last few days. They had a turnover of 5 billion in 2016. They employ directly about 20,000 people in the UK and many more through subcontractors and other companies that work for them. They do public sector contracts in the UK, so things like hospital food, prison services, accommodation for military families. And on the 15th of January, they went into compulsory liquidation, causing all kinds of problems. Their chairman is a man called Philip Green, and not to be confused with Philip Green, a man who ran a top 100 UK company into the ground. This Philip Green, incidentally, once flew 100 guests 8,500 miles on 2 private jets to attend an eco-spa. Yeah, you don't get to call it an eco-spa when you fly your guests in on a private jet. It's like showing up at a vegan cafe in a meat dress. You've completely obviated the point of the exercise. Stop bothering. And this is what I call a green screen. Incidentally, the presence of these two does mean that over the last decade there have consistently been more companies in the FTSE 100 chaired by men called Philip Green than there have chaired by women of colour, although that is also true of any other name of a man who runs a FTSE 100 company, because it's 2018 and we are still so far away from the progressive society we all want to live in that it's terrifying. Also, not to be confused with Philip Green, Colonel Philip Green from Star Trek, because at least Star Trek has women of colour in it. Theresa May was asked about the Carillion situation at Prime Minister's Question Times, and she said 2 things which I think are spectacularly stupid. The first one is this.
I might first of all remind the Right Honourable Gentleman that a third of the Carillion contracts with the government were let by the Labour government.
Yes, Theresa, that's a great excuse if, while the Labour government was doing that, you were aggressively opposing it, and as soon as you got the chance and your party got into power, you reversed that decision and stopped it happening ever again. But you didn't, did you? What happened was a third of it happened under the Labour government and the other 2/3 happened under Conservative government, which means that you did twice as much of it. I'm very much against that, and that's why I've done twice as much of it. It doesn't wash. It doesn't wash at all. Furthermore, the only reason that the Labour government ended up doing this was because of something that had happened under the previous Conservative government, under Margaret Thatcher, where she brought in a thing called compulsory competitive tendering, which meant that councils had to open up public service tendering to a competitive process, which meant that private companies could bid for that work. And there are times when you want there to be a bidding process so that you get the best price and you get the cheapest thing. If you have a choice of buying the same product from a bunch of places, always go for the cheapest one. But is the cheapest one always the best when we're talking about hospital food? Is the cheapest food going to make people feel better quickly? Is it going to help them recover from serious operations? No, of course it's not. There are some times when competitive tendering just doesn't give us the best result. And while I'm at it, dear all MPs, that bit where somebody says something in Parliament and you go, when that happens, every single person in the country thinks you're a tit. Because none of the rest of us discuss serious adult issues in that stupid, childish way. We all stopped doing that when we left primary school. I mean, what would happen if there was a government debate about school bullying and how we could end it? Well, would the good honourable gentleman not agree that taking someone's dinner money away is indeed a serious breach of their personal integrity and human... You can't discuss bullying when you're doing it, so stop. Secondly, she said this.
But what Labour oppose isn't just a role for private companies in public services, but the private sector as a whole. The vast majority of people in this country in employment are employed by the private sector.
Yes, you're right. There are more jobs in the private sector, and there's a reason for that, Theresa, which is you privatised everything. There aren't any public sector jobs because you sold them all off. And you talk about the situation as though jobs are always a good thing, and you haven't asked the question, are they good jobs? Are these 0-hour contracts? Do they pay a living wage? Is there training? Is there progression? Is there an opportunity for flexible working for people with caring responsibilities? Is there job security? Or could these jobs fall away in seconds because people have been bidding an inappropriate amount for a public sector contract that hasn't been costed properly. What's happening now is the government is having to pay to continue these important public sector services. And that was always the complaint about the public sector, was that when they ran out of money, the government would have to pay to continue the services. But at least if these services had started out in the public sector, we wouldn't have had to pay for the enormous bonuses that some of the board of Carillion have been picking up. You know, Richard Howson took over a £500,000 bonus last year, and his 660 grand salary will continue to be paid until October. Zafar Khan, the former finance director, who's already left, is getting his 425 grand salary paid right the way through to September, while Carillion employees who were at work at the time that the liquidation was announced found that within a few minutes their petrol vouchers no longer worked to get them home from their job. The situation is a complete mess. It raises huge questions about the scale of privatisation of services that are clearly not well suited to it. And there are really important questions to be answered and lessons to be learned. And here's just one suggestion, Theresa. Maybe we could make better decisions if we had the discussion about it in a way that doesn't resemble an outtake from Riot at St Trinian's. Thanks for watching the News at Kate. Please keep subscribing, sharing and sponsoring us. We really appreciate your support. Government ends up having to bail the public sector. No.
It doesn't bail though. It wasn't.
It's not. I know.
It was the cost. It was just the
Yep, I know. Beep it and I'll do it better. Stop being mean.
That's going in.
Good. I hope it does. I hope it does. James Fart is awful. Fact. Hashtag fact. Edit that, motherfucker. So,